بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So today inshallah we're going to talk about al-awqat al-manhiyun anha, that the times that it is prohibited to pray. What do you guys know about this subject? And why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make times where an individual cannot pray or should not pray?
Because others use that time for something else.
Okay.
Worship. There's a time and place and role of worship. There's no
All right.
like it or not.
Right. So Islam, a big part of Islam is submitting, right? And sometimes there are things that we understand. Sometimes there are parts and elements of it that we just don't understand. So it's important to keep in mind that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that these are the times you can pray, those are the times that we utilize to pray. And if there are times that we can't pray, those are the times that we prevent ourselves or we prohibit ourselves from praying. There's a lot of khilaf in the subject. There's a lot of differences of opinion around this on how to deal with those times in particular. Inshallah, we'll talk about some of them today. So these are the 5 prohibited times in the madhāhib, right? In the madhāhib, I don't think there's much difference of opinion over these times. It's just how you deal with these times. So in general, you'll find an agreement for these times amongst the 5 madhāhib. The only thing that you'll find is different is that, okay, some of them will give preference to the prohibition. Some of them will make it general, and some of them will make it absolute. So it's important to understand these 5 times. And I know that just putting it here in words, it can be a little bit challenging. It can be a little difficult, but inshallah, I do have a chart coming up, but I just want to explain the times before I bring the chart up. So the first one over here, after Fajr until sunrise. What time is that? You guys know? So when we talk about after Fajr, so over here, I'm actually talking about when the Fajr time comes in. So what's unique to the madhāhib is this time, and we'll talk about that. But what I'm talking about here, and when we discuss it within the madhāhib, it's actually the beginning of the Fajr time. And we said Fajr time starts when? 15 degrees, 18 degrees, 11, 13, here we go, 11, bro. I was like, I'm telling you, just make it easy, bro.
When we start seeing the ways of the sun,
yes, right. So when actually sunlight actually clears the horizon, and there are 2 ways the sunlight clears the horizon. One is it's described as like a fox of a tail, and basically what happens is when the light first breaks the horizon, it actually goes straight up. And then after the sun comes up a little bit further, it actually begins to spread out. That is the Fajr time. So when the light first breaks the horizon, that is not Fajr time. When it actually spreads across the horizon, that is actually the beginning of Fajr. And again, it's more of a modern discussion on how to deal with it. And we had talked about it before on how it is that you actually determine the Fajr time. You have those people who say it's 18 degrees. And 18 degrees is from basically the angle of descent. And that would be the angle of where we are in relation to the sun. So you have stricter opinions and you have more lenient opinions, just like with everything else.
But these opinions they don't vary depending on the madhāhib.
No, they don't. Yeah. So it's not a madhhabi thing, because all the madhāhib have an agreement because of the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ talks about the timing for the salawat. The only people there. So I would say the only madhhab that actually has a difference concerning the beginning of the prayer time is who? The Hanafis, right? So the Hanafis, they have a difference. They have a stronger difference of opinion concerning the Asr time specifically, right? So the Asr time, they say for the Jumhur, for the majority of scholars, they say the Asr time starts when what?
When the length of the shadow is longer than the object itself.
Okay, so it's going to be equal plus the zenith length. Right? Yeah. So basically, when the sun is at its highest point, this is called the zenith, right? So when the sun's at its highest point, the length of that shadow plus your equivalent, that is the beginning of Asr time. It's not when the shadow length is equal. So it's equal plus the zenith length. That is the beginning of Asr time. And for the Hanafis, when do they say Asr starts?
Double.
When it's double that, right? So when it's double that plus the zenith length, that's when it starts for them. There is actually a difference of opinion even with the Fajr for them, and a lot of it And even amongst the different madhāhib, they have a difference of opinion on the adhans on how to deal with Fajr al-Kadhib or Fajr al-Sadiq. What's interesting is that you do have like in Turkey, you guys know what time they pray Asr?
Maybe around 16.
They pray the Jumhur time in Turkey, yeah. So even within the madhab, I think I guess there's a difference of opinion. Otherwise, they wouldn't do that. But if you go to the subcontinent, they will have a later Asr time in most places. But I was really surprised when I went to Turkey myself, and I found that they were praying at the Jumhur time, not at the standard, quote unquote, standard Hanafi time. So after Fajr until the sunrise. So, and then the next one is from the sunrise. So how do we determine sunrise? So here's the sun and here's the horizon. At what point does Fajr time end? I want you guys just to tell me to stop. Stop. Okay. So right here is the end of Fajr time. The moment the sun comes here, what happens? Fajr time's over, right? Fajr time's over. And now the haram time begins, right? This was all manhi an in the beginning, and we'll talk more into detail about that. But once it gets here, and then as I move up, when can I start praying again? You guys tell me. Huh? We're here or here?
No.
Even after
I'm just you guys are making me bounce the sun around. Like, come on, what's going on? Huh? After, right when it clears?
No, there would have to be a small.
Yeah, so it actually has to not only clear the horizon, there has to be a gap between the horizon and the sun. And at this time you can now pray, because you can't actually pray here because it's still touching the horizon. Once it clears the horizon, then this time you can start initiating the prayer again. When the sun is at its zenith, when is that? Right, when it's at its highest point. And how long does it stay there? It just stays like a few minutes. It's not even, I don't even think it's a few minutes, honestly. It's just a very short time of when it reaches its highest point. Then when it moves here, what happens? This is when Dhuhr starts, right? So a lot of people will confuse thinking that, okay, when it's here, this is when Dhuhr starts. No, it actually, after it clears that zenith, which is, it might be like a minute or a couple of minutes, 5 minutes just to be safe, that would be the beginning of Dhuhr time.
Because if you see your shadow, you'll see it.
Yeah. So you can't, staring at the sun is probably not a good idea in general, but so how do we judge it? By looking at our shadow, right? So basically what's going to happen is as the sun moves like this, our shadow is going to get longer or shorter, right? It's going to get shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter until it gets to the shortest point. That is what? That's the haram time, right? That's the waqt manhiyun an. And then as my shadow starts elongating again, I can start praying because it is now Dhuhr time. Sure.
When back then, right, when it was a cloudy day,
So they would generally estimate it. Yeah, it would just be an estimation. They have watched it, right? Their watch didn't tell them the sunrise and sunset, right?
Actually, I think they had a watch.
Huh?
I think they had a watch.
They might have used this, but sundials, mumkin, but غيره.
If you look at the haram, even in the books of the Shawafi, they say they have 3 clocks usually, right? And then that clock is going to tell which salah is for which salah.
Like it had a mechanism?
Yeah, just like try to imagine it's like an analog clock that they used to put it somewhere.
During the time of the Prophet?
No, during the time of no.
I was like,
later.
I was like, wow, they're more advanced than that. Like Islam is amazing, right?
Turn it?
No,
they right. So
this 8th century.
Yeah. So the thing is, like, you're talking about as throughout the Muslim empire, and and I hate to use the word time for so many things, right? But as time progressed, there were different mechanisms to actually keep track of time, quote unquote. The most famous one that we know is what? The sand glass, right? So the sundial is one way, right? Sundial is one way, but not everybody lives in a desert, right? So they don't get 300 days out of the year which are sunny. A lot of people, they will use the hourglass, right? Hourglass is something that is very common. It's not something that was strange, and they would usually use the hourglass to help them determine and measure time. And then they probably came up with different analog systems, in order to measure time as things progressed. Next one, after Asr until close to sunset. So this is like one of the most subjective times ever. It's basically when the sun loses its strength, or when the sun loses its rays. It's going to be a very subjective time. It's not something that's really hard set or set fast in stone. And this time is probably realistically less than this one. And then finally, the sun immediately before it sets, right? The sun immediately before it sets. And when does Maghrib time start? You guys just tell me when it starts. Here?
Maghrib.
Keep going. I think that.
Here, right? So as soon as the sun clears the horizon, that is when Maghrib actually starts. So there, like we said, there are 5 times, and this is agreed upon amongst all the madhāhib. How the Ḥanbalis deal with it is that there's this red time, and there's the gray time. Basically, the gray time is what's considered to be a light prohibition, and the red time is what's considered a strong prohibition. The strong prohibition and the light prohibition, we'll talk about what the difference is between them. But is there any questions on this graph? Maybe I should draw a little sun, right? What do you think?
Like right now would be the sun.
So right now, can we pray? Where are we right now on the graph? You think we're right here?
I think so.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. No, right now, yes, exactly. So right now would be the prohibited time. What do you think? You think we're here yet, or still a little bit of time to go? Right. I would say we still a little bit. We have a lot of time. All right. So
going back to that chat.
Sure.
You go to the previous slide.
Sure.
You said after Asr. So does that mean, regardless of that green, if I pray Asr, does that time start for me too?
Meaning repeat that.
So I finish my Asr.
Yeah.
I give the salam. So from now I cannot pray any other sunnah.
So over here, this is a light prohibition.
Okay.
Right. So and we'll talk about what the difference is between the light prohibition and the strong prohibition, inshallah. So for the Ḥanbalis at this time, you are only allowed to pray the 2 rak'ah fajr. That's it. I cannot pray any nawafil. I can't pray any extra prayers during this time. I am only allowed to pray the 2 sunan of fajr and the fajr prayer itself. I can't pray anything else other than that. And that's something that's unique. So after fajr and asr only, so basically after this time and this time, and we're talking about the light prohibition, is that I can repeat the congregational prayer. Meaning that if I prayed asr at home, I didn't realize what time it was. It was after asr, and I came to the masjid and I found they're making an iqamah. I already made asr, right? So for me, I shouldn't pray now, right? I shouldn't pray now. But there is an exception for this. There's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he saw 2 men sitting in the back of the masjid, and he said, are you guys Muslim? They're like, yeah. So he said, why didn't you guys pray with us? And they said, we already prayed before. He said, listen, when the iqamah is made in the masjid, then join the Jumaa, join the congregation. The 2 rak'ah after tawaf, there's a hadith, Ya Bana Abd Manaf, the tribe of Abu Abd Manaf, don't prohibit for anyone from praying in this haram, in this space, at any time during the day or the night. Some scholars make it very specific to the haram, saying that there's no nahi waqt, there's no prohibited times in the haram itself. The Ḥanbalis, they say that this, obviously you can only make this in the haram unless you forget and you leave Makkah and you remember that you have to make your 2 rak'ah. The funeral prayer you can make during that time also, and you can make up for the routine voluntary prayer. Yani the sunnah rawatib you can make during those times. The sunnah rawatib you can only make after asr. So even for fajr you can't make them up. Meaning if I missed if I didn't pray my sunnah for Isha, for example, I forgot and I wanted to make them after fajr came in, then the mu'tamid or the accepted opinion or the standardized opinion in the Ḥanbali madhab is that you can only make them up after asr. And we'll talk about what is the timing for the sunnah, right? Because the fard, the obligatory prayers, they have their timing, they have their windows. Do the sunnah have the same windows, or do they have expanded windows, or or is that it? When the time goes, you've lost your opportunity. So the strong prohibition, these are the only things you can do. So during these red times, there are only 2 things that you can do. During the red times, there are only 2 things that you can do. You can only make up your obligatory prayers, and you can make the funeral prayer if you feel the body is heavily decaying. Meaning if the smell is starting to get really strong, in order to prevent the harm and to get the body buried as soon as possible, it is okay to make the funeral prayer. But like I said, these are the only 2 things I'm allowed. But for the Hanafis, they take an even stronger position on this, saying that the waqt al-nahi is waqt al-nahi. You cannot pray anything, even if you miss your obligatory prayer. You have to wait until that time finishes, and then you can make your prayers. Any questions on any of these? Yes, no? Okay, I'll go ahead.
A question on Jumaa. Is that exceptional for that one, or?
So the Jumaa prayer is an exception, and even that is a minority opinion within the Ḥanbali madhāhib. What has happened, I don't know if it's a worldwide phenomena or it's just a Western thing, because I know we have multiple Jumaas now, right, in the West. So there's an agreement amongst all the madhāhib that you cannot pray Jumaa at Asr time, right? You can't make it at Asr time. But there is one statement from Ahmed where he allowed Jumaa to be made at Dhuha time. And when does Dhuha time start? Right, so it starts here. This whole time right here would be considered Dhuha time. This whole time right here would be considered Dhuha time. And if a person stays in the masjid and he prays right here, that would be considered Ishraq, right? So, but this entire time would be considered Dhuha. Sure. So this time here, from this time here until this time here, this is considered Dhuha. But if a person stays in the masjid, until this time and he prays here, that would be, this is what we call Ishraq. But it's actually, and sometimes they're used interchangeably. But basically for Imam Ahmed, in one of his statements, and even that it's based on a weak hadith, but I mean, alhamdulillah, what are you going to do? There is, for him, what would we say is Jumu'ah time now? Where would it start?
After the red.
It would start here. Does that make sense?
All the way until Asr.
It would go up until here. What is another way for us to deal with, like, because it's a logistical problem, right? There's just too many people and there are too few centers that host Jumaa. What are some solutions for that?
Multiple.
Right, you need to have multiple Jumaas. That's one way of doing it. Right. So now we said there's an agreement that you can't have Jumaa at Asr time. Right. There's no madhab. There's no qawl that allows praying Jumaa at Asr time. It has to be like this. This window is agreed on. Right. This window. It's actually all four madhab say this is the window. It's only one statement in the Hanbalis that allow this that increase it to this window. So for that reason, they've actually opened up this window, and it's out of need that it's being used. And even if the position is weak, because of the maslahah, because of the need of the time, this is why they've opened up the window a little bit. Meaning that if I'm allowed to pray at this time, ideally I should what? I should pause here, right? Ideally I should pause here. But even within the madhab, what did we say? We said that even the obligatory prayers are allowed, and Salat al-Jumaa is an obligation.
It does not, the prohibition, even if that would prohibit, it would not include the khutbah, right? I mean, the salah itself.
Yeah, the salah itself. Absolutely. So
during the khutbah there is a zawal, it's fine.
Yeah. So which brings up an interesting masala now. If I came to attend the Jumaa at this time and I missed it, what do I do? No, that's the last one. Let's say that I attend it right here, and it's the last one, and I have to get back to work. Can I pray Dhuhr before Dhuhr?
No.
Right, I have to go back to work, right? I have to leave work, and I have to wait for Dhuhr to come in, and then I can start praying Dhuhr. Yeah.
So the red time, we're not like
Mhm. Yeah.
What is that? How much time do you have to wait until you prepare the Dhuhr?
That is not even long. You're talking about just a few minutes.
Oh.
So when it reaches its height, basically when the moment the sun goes like this, that's the time's over. So it's a very short time. It's not a very long window.
My question.
Sure.
What about Tahiyyat al-Masjid?
So there's a difference of opinion on what's called Salat Dhat Asbab. Basically if I have a reason to pray, whether it be because of entering the masjid, I want to make up my sunan, there's these are usually the two, right? These two are the biggest ones. For the Hanbalis, you'd be okay at this time and at this time. They would say that you can't pray these three times. Yeah. right? Even kusuf, like all of those sunan, though basically you need a reason to pray. But if I'm just doing like a nafil, right? I just feel like praying, they would say that you can't pray those at this entire, like basically the entire window. Does that make sense? There would be a little bit of tolerance here and here, but there would be no tolerance in these 3 red zones at all. The Zahiris, they say as long as you have a reason, you can pray anytime.
Anytime.
Yeah, because they say that the reason for these prohibitions to come, and it's very close to the Shafi'i qawl too. The Shafi'is, they're a little bit more firm on not praying it, but they say that this specifically applies to nawafil, that it applies to prayers that don't have, there's no purpose. Not no purpose in the sense that like, okay, you just like, just walking and just decide to start praying. No, I mean, you obviously have a reason to it, but it's not a sunnah, whether it be muakkada or ghair muakkada. It's not tahiyyat al-masjid. It's not kusuf or khusuf. I mean, it's not any of those prayers. And they say that's the reason it's prohibited. The prohibition doesn't apply to the sunan. It applies to nawafil. So, which brings us to the next question, which I didn't actually put it here, but the timing for the nawafil. So, thank you, Sam. The timing for the nawafil. If I miss my sunan, if I come in and I'm praying salat al-dhuhr, I wanted to pray 4 rak'ah before dhuhr started, and I didn't have the opportunity. The iqamah is being made. Up until when can I pray those? So I'm here, right? I'm here. At what point does the time end? Thank you, Sam. Now over here, there's a lot of difference of opinion. Sure. I come into I leave work, I get to the masjid, and they're making salat al-Jumaa. So the 4 sunan I wanted to pray before dhuhr, did I have an opportunity? No. All right, up until when? When does my window close? Now, we're not talking about the fard, right? The fard window for Fajr, the fard window closes where? At sunrise, right? Once the sun clears the horizon, the window for it is closed, meaning that any time I pray after that is going to be qada. I'm going to be making it up. If I pray dhuhr, the end time for dhuhr is the beginning of asr, right? And the end time for asr is sunset. And the end time for the sunset is when the sun completely clears the horizon and the redness in the sky disappears. And Isha, for the Jumhur, when does Isha go until? For the Jumhur. It goes until Fajr, right? And for the Ḥanbalis, it goes until? So when we say midnight, we don't actually mean 12 o'clock. We mean halfway through the night, meaning halfway from here to here, right? From here to here. From Maghrib to Fajr, this is considered the halfway point. So the question now comes, that's for the fard. And I think we have a good understanding of the timing for the faridah and the windows for them. What about for the sunan? Do they follow the same windows? Do they have extended windows? Or when you miss them, they're gone? All of these are valid opinions, by the way. if you wanted to be more confused.
You can make up the sunnah.
Okay, you can make up your sunan. All right.
You can?
I don't know. I'm asking. You can't.
I know
Man, I need to get some pop. I need to get some popcorn for this. No, I'm just.
Different from the others.
Okay. So there are two sets of sunan. There are 2 sets of sunan that are we would deal with them separately. Which one of them is the sunan of Fajr, and the second the witr, right? So these two we deal with separately. Why do we deal with them separately? Just like Mikhail said, because the Prophet ﷺ used to pray them while he was
traveling.
While he was traveling. All right. Every time.
One hadith that he even made
he made qada, right? He made qada, and even of witr. And how did he do qada of it? By praying duha. So those are something that are very, very much so established. But the question then comes, all right, how do we determine, like, when does the window end? Does the window end with the ending of the prayer time?
What does it mean?
So the prayer is like dhuhr. So the sunan of dhuhr, they're attached to dhuhr, right? So,
entered, that is gone.
So if Asr ends, you're saying until here.
No.
Asr begins.
Asr begins. Okay, you're saying so the window ends here for the sunan
For the sunnah
of Dhuhr.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, you can make it up in the asset.
Okay, so you can make it up here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're saying from, I would go from the time of Dhuhr.
That's what I said. I just wanted my popcorn. Just listen to everyone.
From the time of Dhuhr
Uh-huh.
to the gray zone.
To the-
Asr.
Okay, so you're saying up until here.
No.
Oh,
To
yeah.
Right.
Saying
To
whatever
there,
what
yes.
we were saying.
Okay, so the beginning of Asr.
Yeah,
Yes.
begin.
All right, so you guys are saying Zohar time, that basically you can only pray your sunan at this time.
No.
Dhuhr sunnah, yeah.
Yes.
Okay, in my opinion, this is what I know.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear.
Area, in the gray, you cannot make up the sunnah in the red area.
Okay, so
Is
you,
that what you're asking?
no. I'm saying what is the timing for that sunan?
Well, ideally, it's
No,
in the
the,
corresponding period.
not ideally. What is the timing for it? Like what is
What does it mean?
what is permissible for me to have considered it? Because you have something called ada, which is making it, and you have something called qada, which is making it up. So I think we're all in agreement. If I pray my sunan during this time, it is ada, right? I'm making it. Like, what if I prayed here? This is qada.
Yes.
All right.
Oh,
What if I prayed here?
Still
Qada. What if I prayed here? At what time can I stop doing qada?
Every
At the
prayer
right-
have its own sunnah.
I agree.
So which sunnah are you asking?
I'm asking for the sunnah of Dhuhr.
So
you have
I think
Uh-huh.
Dhuhr sunnah starts when Asr starts,
When Asr starts. Tayyib.
and then
Well,
between that zone to the Asr, it's like ada sunnah to Dhuhr.
Okay. So it's not
And
qada.
then- No, and then on that way Asr, it's like qada.
Over here is qada. Okay. Over here is qada. And over here it's ada. And over here it's qada.
Yes.
And here, and here, and here, and here.
That's sunnah Isha and that's sunnah Maghrib.
No, I'm saying I missed I want to make up the sunnah for Dhuhr.
After Asr,
That's it. This is the last time.
So, I don't know.
Last call.
Basically, you got Nafi that.
ما في قضاء.
I have an opinion.
Okay,
Just-
go ahead.
I'm just throwing this out here. It's not, my opinion is like, you missed it, that's it.
Okay.
But-
you know,
Yeah. I think I've heard someone say something about like, you can make it up only within that time. So it's like.
What is within that time?
Those for today,
Yes.
those for the next day.
Zain. I like that. Huh.
Rasulullah
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
they overslept the Fajr. When they wake up,
Yeah.
they woke up, they prayed.
The sunnah
Yeah.
and
the Fajr.
the fard. Okay.
And they even give adhan.
Okay.
As far as I know.
Okay.
And so my understanding is you always can make, of course, it's making it qada, but
Mm.
still you're making it up. So like you miss, there is a different opinion I heard in my notes saying if you miss the part, it's done, it's over.
Yes, there is.
You never can.
You can never make it
Yeah,
up.
that's it.
So,
The other opinion, as far as I know, it's a majority, more strong opinion.
yeah.
Yeah, it's unfortunate you're sinful, but you still have to. You
Yeah.
still must make
It's-
it up because it's a death.
Yeah,
You must deliver the death.
Even that, there's a little caveat to it, right? So if you miss it on purpose, there's no qada. Yani,
Yeah.
if I purposely skip Asr,
Yeah,
then there's nothing for me to make up.
somebody should make it.
Yeah, and the Hanbalis would say you're kafir. Like, you need to take your shahada again and make the prayer.
So what's the right
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
Yeah, you gotta love. You know what I mean? You gotta love how many kafirs there are in the world. So how do we deal with this? And Allah knows best. Basically, from my understanding, is you have time to make this up until the salah comes back around. Meaning that, right? Yeah, you have 24 hours. So once, if I miss the sunnah of dhuhr and I intend to pray them, I can pray them up until this point, and then khalas, that's it. Even if I pray at this time, it's going to count for nafila. It's not going to count as the sunnah of dhuhr. Another opinion is that the time for the sunnah extend to the end of the next salah.
The end of the next one.
Right. This is based on the hadith of Prophet ﷺ that he used to pray the sunnah of dhuhr after Asr. And the Aisha radiallahu anha, she said that he died doing that. He ﷺ actually died doing that. So based on that, you have some scholars who say basically the time for the sunnah are here until here. This is the time for the sunnah of dhuhr, meaning that the time for the sunnah of Asr is from here until here until the end of Maghrib, until Isha. The sunnah for Fajr are from here until the end of Fajr. You have basically you have 2 salah, then you have 24 hours. Some say it has to be within that window and what you do if you miss it, and then some say that if you miss it, you miss it. Can you still pray?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you'll get the reward for that, but it will not be the reward of the sunnah. That's all. So I hope I confuse you guys. Sorry.
So if I miss sunnah duha,
Yeah.
and it's the next day, it's let's say, or it's Isha time.
It's okay. So basically, you're here and you're right here now.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so if I make that,
Mhm.
I make it up,
Yeah.
it will not, will account for the, like, certain, let's say, I want to get a house in paradise.
Uh-huh.
And I have to pay the 12 sunnah.
The 12 sunnah, yeah.
So, and I'm not supposed to pray 2 sunnah before the Dhuhr,
Mhm.
and after. So if I make it up at Isha time, will like,
There is an opinion that would support you and said that you do, because why? We said that one opinion says that the time for the sunnah extend up until
24 hours.
Until 24 hours, until the prayer comes back again. So one opinion would be okay.
Since there is no clear evidence for either, I would say we should encourage ourselves to pray anyways.
Yeah.
And
I'm saying, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create these windows? So we'd respect them, right? So that we'd respect them. But saying that, are there times where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows these windows to open up? Yes or no? Right? So when I'm traveling, if I'm taking an exam, if there's some kind of difficulty, if I'm going someplace and I fear I'm going to miss the prayer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me the rukhsah to open up these windows and combine. If that's the case with the obligatory prayers, what about the sunnah? Which are a lot less demanding. So, wallahu alam, I believe that there is some leniency, to it. But obviously you can't be like, oh man, the sunnah of Asr like 3 years ago. I mean, it starts becoming a bit like a game, right? It starts becoming a bit like a game. The idea of that once you miss it, you miss it. This is very encouraging for people to make sure in encouraging way to make them pray out in time. But like I said, and Allah knows best. It seems like there's more leniency and more leeway with the sunnah, so we should try to give that leeway and give that leniency in it, and give people an opportunity to make it up.
So can I ask, maybe you're going to cover later on, but jumping again. If I missed Farz prayers.
Yes.
I missed yesterday, the last week's before.
I think we had talked about it before. Yeah. No, we had talked about it before when we talked, like, at what point do I not make up prayers? I'm in a coma for 3 months. I've missed like how many hundreds of prayers at this point?
3 months. That is
3. Yes.
5 times 5. That's 150 times 3. 150 prayers.
So
One madhāhib says that you're not responsible.
You're not responsible. Yeah.
Because that's not a responsible time.
But what if I missed a week?
as far as I know, the Ḥanbalis require everything.
Right. Yeah. So the thing is, you're going to have a spectrum of opinions in this. Some will say, oh, it's like you're in a coma for 3 years. Too bad. Go ahead. You know what I mean? So get to work.
Go back to your coma.
It's like get to work. So the thing is, you have that. Go back to. So you'll have those, and the reason for that is because they believe in the sanctity of these prayers, and that sanctity needs to be preserved, and they want to discourage people from getting into comas, apparently. And the other thing is, and then you have a number of scholars who base it off the number. It said, okay, if a woman is obligated to make up her fasts, but she's not obligated to make up her prayers, and a lot of it just has to do with the sheer number, even though the fast is longer than the prayer. Like to make up, let's assume that a woman misses 35 prayers. How long would that realistically take? A couple hours? Not even?
Depends on how far.
If each prayer, let's assume each obligatory prayer takes about 5 minutes. Yeah. So what are you talking about? 2-3 hours?
Probably.
Right. So 2-3 hours. It's not outrageous. If you actually think about it from like a logistic point of view, it's not outrageous. But just because of sheer number, you have. No, so I don't know. I don't know. I believe it is.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because even Ibn Abbas, he gave the same reasoning for the number of missed fasts for the one who's elderly and the woman who's pregnant. It's just the sheer number that it becomes so overwhelming that what happens when we see a huge number in front of us as people, what happens?
We tend to get
You get discouraged, you get demoralized, and you look for substitutes for that. So, and like I said, and Allah knows best, and I believe that is one of the reasons, is that just because of the sheer number, you're allowed to skip that. So if that's the case, if a woman has that excuse during her cycle, and the similar type of excuse applies to somebody who's in the coma, and Allah knows best. Some people, we have to understand that everybody's going to have a different take, and they're going to have a different feeling behind this. So if a person, and it could be something short, it could be a coma for 3 days, it could be for a week. I think everybody needs to kind of make their own judgment call at that point. It's like, because some people, if you're feeling overwhelmed, then it's probably better for your relationship with Allah to have a healthy relationship, to leave it, and to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to overlook, the fact, and you were excused too, right? You were excused. Or what about the person who started praying later in his life? You were raised on Islam and you don't start praying until you're 40, 50. You're gonna make up like 45 years of prayer? Right? It's impossible. It's impossible to do that. And some people, no, you have to at least try. Right? This is going to be one answer that you get. And for some people, that's a very reasonable answer. For them, they will say like, no, I do try. With every zohar, I pray an extra zohar. With every maghrib, I pray an extra maghrib. Like, why do you do that? Because I don't know how many prayers I missed, and I want to at least try to make up some of them. It's an individual endeavor, right? Everybody wants to draw near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and everybody's going to deal with these ibadat in a different way. And for those people who feel like, no, I'm going to keep working and I'm going to keep chipping away at it. And some people really have that stoic mindset where they're going to be like, I'm going to keep working on it. And some people they're just going to feel so overwhelmed that forget the prayers they need to make up. They might just leave praying altogether. So everybody needs to figure out where they are. They need to figure out what their relationship is, and they need to figure out kind of how to deal with these issues in particular. And and Allah knows best.
But if someone missed 1,000 salats.
Yeah.
What I would say, maybe we should use like just seek forgiveness and start praying. It's like just don't make sure you don't miss a salat.
So there's a difference between someone who's starting to pray now, right? Because the one who's starting to pray now, do you want to start reminding him of the prayers he missed, or do you just want to get him to start praying? Right, you want to get him to start praying. And somewhere down the line, you might want to start talking about. Usually, such people, they'll come to the realization themselves. Like, we don't need to bat them over the head with like verses in a hadith, and like this is called spiritual abuse, right? It's like, do you know you missed 1,000 prayers? You know what I mean? Like, what is he benefiting from that? Or like, you know what I mean? Like, what is she benefiting by like giving them that reminder? Like, so if we calculated how many prayers you missed, that's not a reminder. That's just torture. It's just torturous at that point.
Does the same thing apply to reverts?
To what?
Reverts?
No, because they're not accountable for everything that they did before they came to Islam.
Even for the Ḥanbalis, those who didn't pray and started praying, they were kafir.
I mean, they were kafir in the first place. Yeah, I say so. It's like for that. Yeah, I think the Ḥanbali way is the easy way. It's like so not only do you not have to make up the prayers, you weren't even Muslim.
So after you were welcome to Ḥanbali.
Yeah, right. Allah was done. And the thing is, like, even the issue with the prayer, why do you have such firmness and such staunchness from some of the madhāhib, especially the Ḥanbalis? It's because of how grave they saw it to be. They weren't really making takfir of the people and saying like, oh, this person's kafir. No, because the reality is you can't even investigate somebody who doesn't pray, right? There's no way to know if somebody prays or somebody doesn't pray. There's no way of finding that out. Even the person who doesn't pray, when he comes to the court, you know what he needs to do? Like for istitaba, be like, you don't pray and you're going to be executed because this is apostasy. So you know what he has to do?
Promise.
He's like, all right, promise. He's like, all right, man, I'll pray. And that's it. Like it literally, it's just like that. It's done. So for that person who doesn't pray and somebody who's like announcing it, it's very different, right? It's a very different thing. I refuse to pray. And he's standing up in the court of law saying, I refuse to pray, versus somebody who's lazy about it. And then the judge says to him, he's like, hey, listen, you need to pray. Otherwise, you're going to go to jail, or we're going to put the death penalty. And he's just like, all right, fine, I'll pray. And that's it. The judge will let him go. He's not going to send somebody after him to like make sure, be like, all right, make sure he prays, make sure you see him pray. Yeah, there's no investigation and things like that. I mean, it's more of a fear tactic than it is, actual implementation.
I have a question.
Sure.
I heard that, maybe I heard wrong,
that the people who have to make up their prayer on the day of judgment, that removes the part.
Oh, I've never heard that.
No.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I can think of that would be even close to that is if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala holds us accountable for the prayers that we missed.
Yeah.
And if he says, make up the prayers, and we're not in a position where we can do that at that point. It's basically, it's a way of, it's a way of instilling fear in that individual and putting perspective into how they live their life. You know, and may Allah protect us and not you know, I ask Allah not to, for any of us to be asked that question.
Yeah. So I know there's a difference of opinion when it comes to, you know, like if you don't pray at Nafil.
Yeah.
And there probably is some stuff thing that you know, talking about like maybe like someone who doesn't want to pray versus someone who's lazy. You know?
Yeah.
There's probably something about it.
There is. I mean, there's a whole discussion about it. I think there's a whole discussion about it, and I'm saying like even the firmer positions, the reality is there's no follow up in any of those particular cases, and I believe, and Allah knows best, that the idea is just to instill a sense of fear in the people, so that, you know, to scare them into praying and make sure that they're, you know, at the least that this is something that they're doing, because of the number of hadith that we have, you know, where the Prophet ﷺ talks about the difference between a Muslim and the kafir is the salah, you know, and you have a lot of hadith that talk about the importance of prayer.
And negligence and laziness is different from verbal denouncing the legitimacy of this.
100%.
If you say it's not legitimate, then you cross the line.
Absolutely.
Cool.
I agree.
A person who's lazy and negligent have not, you know, crossed that line.
Yeah, yeah. And you know why? Because they know it. They just don't, you know what I mean? They just don't act on it. Yeah,
I heard most of the companions, they took that opinion like, you don't pray, you're not good.
Even if they did, like you have to look at what the condition was. Who were the people that didn't pray at that time? They're the munafiqeen. You know what I mean? It hadn't come to a point, and you have to understand, like the society, most of them knew each other. You know what I mean? Like it was a very close knit society. The ummah was nowhere near as large as it is today. So the context is a little bit different, you know, for them and how it applies and the encouragement for them. I mean, I'm sure if you had asked any of them, like, you know, you think there's going to come a time where people get lazy and they don't pray, they'd be like, what are you talking about? You know, I mean, like somebody who doesn't pray, like for some people, it's very difficult to even imagine somebody who doesn't pray. I remember, like, alhamdulillah, like my kids, once they started turning 6, 7, they started praying. And when I told them, like, I didn't start praying until I was like 16, 17, they were like, what? Like, you know, it was just like, wait, what? Like, you didn't pray? Like, why? So you have to, like, it's a mindset is something that's important too. Like, if this is all you know, imagining something outside of that is very different. It's very challenging. Any other questions? Or we'll take a break, inshallah.
Even all those things that we talked about. If we go back to the very, I think, foundation, the etiquette of salah, of guarding our salah, and making salah on time or at earliest convenience or within the windows that people want to follow, that would protect us from missing salah and having all these challenges about I need to make it up, all these things, you know, and that's where I see the importance of trying to make salah at the earliest point, whatever your
absolutely
you believe.
Yeah.
You don't have to have that.
You don't have to have that. You don't even need to have that conversation.
I'm gonna make it within 24 hours, you know, or I'm gonna make it next year.
No, absolutely. No, and what is the purpose of putting windows behind all these prayers? It's so that we as Muslims develop a routine, right? And I think that's something that's really fundamental, something that's critical, something that's important. It's something that we do 5 times a day. And it's something that we do at timed intervals. And subhanAllah, it's amazing how the biological clock is actually not completely in sync with the actual clock.
Suppose we had the 50.
Right. Oh, the 50 prayers.
You know, that was first ordered. I mean, you see all the fight that we have now about 5. So if the 50 came, you know, Musa was wise. Musa said, no way. Go back and knock on that door.
SubhanAllah. No, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam did, you know, out of rahmah for his ummah.
Yes.
Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Are there any questions outside of the discussion of sunnah and timings?
Oh yeah. I'm not really too clear about like what you're supposed to do like, before sleeping. You know, I heard like you're supposed to blow and recite like blow hand the nas.
Yeah.
And then probably volume and then do that again.
Yes.
I also heard something else. So can you clarify like what I'm supposed to do?
Sure.
And
So
also I asked also adding identity and last
So these are different narrations that we have on how the Prophet ﷺ used to prepare himself before he went to bed. So the one thing that he ﷺ did himself is he would actually recite the Mawridatain, and then he would blow into his hands 3 times. He would rub his hands all over his body, and then he would do this 3 times. In another narration, the Prophet ﷺ he said to read Ayatul Kursi before you go to sleep, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends an angel down to guard you and protect you over the night. In another narration, you have the Prophet ﷺ, where Fatima asked him, she said that, I feel tired at the end of the day. So he said, before you go to sleep, say Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, ilaha illallah, 33 times each before you go to sleep. So there are a number of different things that you can do before you go to sleep.
So friends, I don't feel like
you could do that. I mean, the thing is, there's nothing prohibiting that, right? Because what is the purpose of doing that wiping? What do you think? No, you want to spread the barakah. You want to spread the blessing and the protection of those verses and of those surahs over your entire body. And it's a very symbolic gesture. So doing that with any verses of the Quran is not problematic.
Was it a practice of the Prophet to make wudu, right?
So yes, it was. So this is another type of protection that he did. He would make wudu before he went to bed. Any other questions?
So just to be clear, before about sunnah and the Quran sunnah what's upon your heart. So when it comes to
Yeah.
So when it comes to that, you follow the Quran sunnah. So that's when it comes to aqidah.
No.
But when it comes to like fatwa or someone's opinion or something, you have to see what it's on the Quran sunnah.
So I'm saying even elements of aqidah. The Prophet ﷺ, he told us that there are 6 pillars of iman, right? Does he tell us how we're supposed to believe in them? All of these things were developed later. The discussion of the essence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, discussions of his characteristics, discussions of, there are so many of these discussions. These were not discussions that happened during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Even fiqh, aqidah, whatever you want to call it, these things, they developed later on. Even issues of like, is the Quran created or not? This is not a discussion the companions had. This is not a discussion that, anybody had. These are all discussions that came much later. So if you want to talk about formation of aqidah as a science, this is not part of the initial stages of Islam. This is something that came much later. We have to believe in those things. How we believe in those things, a lot of that stuff is up for debate. A lot of that stuff is up for discussion. Like, how do I understand Allah's qadr? And then you have an entire spectrum of opinions that deal with, free will versus Allah's ilm. And then you have that debate. And that debate is amongst Ahl Sunnah. How do you deal with that? Again, those discussions are meant to happen in academic circles. They're not meant to happen at the, like for the lay Muslim. It's not going to benefit him. Because what is his purpose? His goal is to worship Allah. His goal is to believe in Allah. Is his goal on how to believe in Allah? Does that make sense? Like, the goal isn't to, how do I believe in Allah? The goal is to believe in Allah. Believe in his messengers, believe in his books, believe in his angels, all of those things that I'm commanded and obligated to believe in. I need to believe in them. I need to submit to them. How I believe in them, I can have a discussion. I have no problem, having that discussion. But do those discussions, and I'll ask you very honestly, do those discussions ever lead to anything healthy?
No, at all.
They don't, right? They just end up to arguing. They end up into differing. They end up in all those things. And like I said, right? And hatred, like, well, takfir. No, and I'm being very honest. They lead all of those academic discussions, they just lead to differing. They don't lead to any type of unity. And we actually mentioned it. Ghazali, he mentions it himself. He said, if you want to cause differing amongst the Muslims, have them talk about Allah's essence. Because Allah's essence is not meant to be understood in the first place. We can't. Can you understand the reality of Allah? Can anyone? It's not possible. Forget that. Let's talk about something even closer to ourselves. Can I understand the reality of my own ruh? Like it's something that's it's like an essential part of me. I cannot function without my spirit. How much what does it weigh? What does it look like? What is it made out of? Like, I don't know any of these things. If I can't understand that, how am I supposed to talk about Azza wa Jal?
So how do you when the Prophet
yeah,
it was like I don't
yeah. And what is their sunnah? The sunnah is not to talk about these things. The sunnah was to teach the people. The sunnah was to bring them together. The sunnah was to teach them akhlaq. The sunnah was to teach them to pray. The sunnah was to encourage them in believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and loving him and loving the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Is this not their sunnah? Or was there sunnah to sit down and be like, okay, akhi, let's talk about Allah's hands? Was this their sunnah? Wallah billah alaykum. Was this their sunnah? No. To sit down and discuss these things?
No.
Do those discussions need to happen? Absolutely. Do they need to happen amongst the lay Muslims?
No.
So what's it called? So can that what he said, following the sunnah, what's it called? Like, for instance, like following the madhāhib.
Yeah.
Because that's you're following their way. Because like
there's a madhab in everything. This is something that we need to understand as Muslims. There's a madhāhib in aqidah. There's a madhāhib in fiqh. Allah yahdik. There's madhāhib in fiqh. There's madhāhib even in tasawwuf. We have tariqas. There's madhāhib in nahu. There's give me a ilm that doesn't have a madhab. And why is that? Because all of these ulum, they are all human endeavors. They're all human endeavors to understand the divine. And we can't. It's not possible to understand the divine. The only thing we can do is these sciences, they help give us context, they help us categorize, they help us understand certain elements and certain things of the religion at an academic level. But at a practical level, if I just showed you how to pray without explaining to you what is a rukun, what is wajib, and what is sunnah, would it make a difference? And all of these things, did the Prophet ﷺ say, okay, this is salat al-dhuhr, and the standing is a rukun, and the ruku is a rukun? Do we have any hadith like this, a single hadith like this? No, we don't. All of this is just a help. It's a science to help categorize some of these things. And believe it or not, it's to help it make it easy for the Muslims. But when it started becoming academic, what happens? Like people will always think, and they'll always think more, and they'll always think deeper, and they're, and they're just going to keep going, and that's healthy. For some people, this is their way of taqarrub. This is their way of drawing near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by having these academic discussions. And I think that's completely fine. It's reasonable, it's healthy. You want to talk about Allah's essence, Jayyid, Mumtaz, let's talk about it. But it has to be in an appropriate setting. And it has to be with people who are open-minded. It has to be with people who are willing to open up the books, who are willing to challenge what it is that they know.
Not like being ticked on people. Yeah.
Well, understand. No, like if you don't believe like this, then this type, prove it. Because the Salaf said so. What does that even mean?
Actually, who from the Salaf?
No, I said who from the Salaf said it. Yeah. No, and then you start saying Ibn Taymiyyah or Qadi Iyad or Qadi Abdul Jabbar. What are you talking about? These, I said these are like way after, like, this is not the Salaf that you're talking about. The Salaf did not have these conversations, so why are you? Unless you're there.
But you know what's ironic though? The Salaf didn't have these discussions, right? Somebody's demanding for me to bring up proof from them. Of something.
No, without them bringing up the proof, al-bayyina ala mudda'i. That the proof is upon the claimant. If you're claiming something, you bring the proof. It's not my obligation. This is your obligation. All I have to do is what? The Prophet ﷺ already told me. Al-yamin ala man ankar. All I have to say is wallahi no. And that's it. I'm done. I fulfilled my obligation. You have to prove it, not me.
How do we follow this in the fact of Rashidin?
So there's a difference in understanding and how to deal with that, and basically a lot of that has to do with, okay, how do you contextualize what the Prophet ﷺ did? Because there are certain rules and certain things that they implemented during their khilafat that didn't happen during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. Simply, I'll just give a few simple examples. One of them is Masala Umariyah, where Umar radiallahu anh, he started seeing that sometimes when you do the when you make the distribution schedule for inheritance, that there are cases where the woman gets more than the man. So he said there are 2 or 3 cases where this happens, and he said this can't apply because the man needs to get more in these cases. So he changed that. Uthman radiallahu anh, he introduced an earlier adhan for the people in the marketplace so that they would know it's time to get ready for salat al-Jumaa. These are not prophetic. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, he compiled the Quran into the form of a book. This is not prophetic. And he was refused. He refused 3 times before he finally opened, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala finally opened his heart. So you want to talk about their sunnah? This is their sunnah, and they introduce things into the religion.
But I have a question.
Yeah.
The hadith itself. Right?
Which one?
So when the Prophet ﷺ say, follow my khulafa, and the ummah itself did not agree the concept of who is a khilafah rashida.
No, who is exactly? No, and quite a very valid question is like, is Hassan from the Khulafa Rashidin?
No, even Uthman.
No, is Ali from the Khulafa Rashidin? You know what I mean? Like you have companions who differed over that. They said that we would say Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman, and we would naskut, and we would stop. You know what I mean? Like all of these things are they're very subjective. It's very important to understand that, things can be black and white to you. I'm okay with that. There are a lot of people who go through their lives and they say this is halal and this is haram. That's great. This becomes a problem when you come and try to impose that on me now. I don't see the world like that. And if you can't force me to come to deen, how can you force me to come to an opinion? So I mean, having this discussion again, I don't mind having these discussions. I think it's healthy. It's part of a show of good khuluq if we can actually debate with each other and engage with one another. I think that's a healthy show of Islam. But if you don't have the ability to do that, don't do it. I'll tell you right now, because you're just going to walk away angry, and you're going to walk away. You're going to take nothing from the subject, and all of it is going to be focused on the person. I've had multiple conversations with different people, like, Sheikh, what about so-and-so? What about so-and-so? What about so-and-so? Ya akhi, I said, lo mutta al-yawm. I said, let's say this person dies. I said, his fikrah, his thought is going to continue on. I don't understand why you're obsessed with the person and leaving the thought process. Is that going to kill anything? I said, if he dies today, the thought is going to continue. How many thoughts have continued on? Marxism is still here, right? And Karl Marx died how long ago? Freud died how many years ago? Einstein died how many years ago? Newton died how many years ago? And their thoughts still, I mean, it's the thought that carries on and continues. If you want to attack something, attack the thought. Why are you going to attack the person? This just shows you have some kind of either jealousy or personal agenda. Allah yafalak.
A lot of stuff going on.
Yeah. No, there always is, Sheikh. There always is, man. You hear all this stuff, and I remember a brother, he asked me, he's like, Sheikh, there's so many people to listen to online. There's so many du'at, and there's so many this, It's like, who do I listen to? I said, listen to the one that brings the people together. I said, because hada manhaj al-nabawi. You want to talk about manhaj? This is the prophetic manhaj. That he sallallahu alaihi wasallam would bring people together. He wouldn't divide them. And if you see anybody sitting there just chopping up people like they're on a chopping board, know that this person is upon misguidance.
Some people, you hear them say, Quran, Sunnah, they say with tajweed.
Yeah. No, akhi, but my thing is, who from amongst the Muslim sects doesn't say I follow the Quran and Sunnah? No, I you know what I mean? No, I'm saying, hatta the Ahmadiyya, anyone, there is no one from the sects who ascribe themselves to Islam who say, I don't follow the Sunnah. They all say we follow the Quran and Sunnah, but they all follow it like according to their understanding. And you can claim you're following the way of the Salaf, because I don't think there is anybody who doesn't claim that. Are you actually following the way of the Salaf? I'm more concerned with that. And how come how do you describe them? How do you define them?
What's the methodology?
Yeah, is there an actual methodology there? Tayyib ya akhi, show me, habibi. In this case, you're showing the fatwa of one sahabi. One sahabi it's not enough. It shows me his fatwa, and it shows me that we respect it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's prophetic.
I'm How dare you say that? I
Allahu
said that
Akbar.
somebody said,
Yeah.
how dare you say that?
Yeah. No, but I'm saying you do it all the time. Because when I say to you, طيب يا أخي, well, Imam Ahmad said this, well, like, yeah, well, Sheikh so-and-so said this. You know what I mean? Like you are the one who's breaking all of these scales of, I'm like, ya akhi, the ummah has agreed on the imam of this person. No, only you agree on the sheikh of this person. What do you, there's no comparison here. So, I mean, Allah protect us. Allah protect us. And, the search for truth is continuous. It has to be ongoing. If I reach a point where I'm like, oh, I have to protect this now, خلاص يا أخي, أنا وصلت إلى مرحلة الجهل. I'm at a point of ignorance now. Truth is always something that we're constantly seeking and something that we're always after. This is the way of the salik, that he's always on a journey. He's always bettering. He's always striving. And if you stop striving and you're just sitting there with your little, with your little manhaj of the salaf, you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to grow. You're not going to, how's your heart going to grow? And why is it that you or he or she, you guys are following this tariqah or this manhaj or this or that, and you're just becoming more staunch and you're becoming more firm and you're becoming more harsh? If you are right, shouldn't your khuluq get better?
Yeah.
Shouldn't your interaction with people get softer? Like, shouldn't you love the Muslims more? Wallahi, I've seen people take happiness when they see somebody fall.
I've seen person like blocking the masjid, where they don't want this person like.
Yeah, and then they take happiness when they see a Muslim like misguided.
Ooh.
Or like, finally the truth came out. I said, like, are you happy about this? Because when did the Prophet ﷺ ever take happiness in any of his companions falling, or like, going into falsehood, or like, doing something wrong? When was it ever, like, when did that ever happen? What kind of twisted deen is that? Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Oh, limulo bishat." So when you have your walima, have a shat, slaughter an animal so that the Muslims can share in your happiness. Like, this is an ummah where we share, where like we empathize with one another, and we're happy with each other, and we're sad with one another when it's time to be sad. What is this, like, me taking, like, is this? It's not deen. You're just a troll. Allah protect us.
Ya Rabbi. Barakallah fikum.
فيك بارك الله سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك واشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك. 1 second.